Hey, what are you doing? How are you? It's Nick Digilio, that's me. How's your face? It's a good face. You can go to Face Village and sell it for $4. Yeah. Hey, what's going on? Thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. It's free. Subscribe, like, comments, tell your mom, tell your friends, spread the word. Check me out on Patreon. That's more important because you can donate and you can help. All the stuff that I provide, the videos, the podcast, even though the podcast is much separate from this, any of the other stuff that I do, it's all free. So the least you can do is kick back a little dough and help out. You know what I'm saying? Be a good person. Don't be a dick. Patreon.com/NickDShow. Patreon.com/NickDShow. Pick a tier, $3, $5, $25 a month, whatever you want to do. Every little bit helps. And so donate absolutely right now. Patreon.com/NickDShow. Also, my podcast, the Nick D Podcast, is part of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Check out RadioMisfits.com, and you can subscribe. It's free. It's available where all podcasts are available, every single platform. Rate, review, spread the word. Check it out every Tuesday, every Friday. Brand new episodes of the Nick D Podcast. All right. Hi. Hey. So I am saddened, as I think so many people. By the way, it's very late right now. I sleep in very weird spurts because, for many, many years I worked overnights. Even before I got into the radio and did the overnight shift on the radio, I worked the graveyard shift, the night crew at Jewel for many years. And I've always been a night owl. So I have very weird sleeping patterns that have never gotten normal, even though I've been out of the overnight radio world, thanks to the jagoffs at WGN for a couple of years now. I still have not regulated my sleep patterns. Most people go to sleep 10, 11 o'clock at night. They wake up 6, 7 in the morning. That's not me. Right now, it's about 3:30 in the morning as I do this. And I'm not sure if you can hear, I have neighbors in the back, because this is as I'm pointing that way, that leads to my dining room slash kitchen, which is also my studio, my makeshift studio with laptop, mixer, interface, and microphone where I do my podcast. That leads to the back windows and my back door to the back porches. And I live in an apartment complex. It's not a complex, it's an old building. This is one of those classic buildings that I live in. This is an old-ass building. This is an old school Chicago, big brown brick building with old-ass radiators. This is an old building. This is an old-school Chicago apartment building, and there are a lot of units in this building, lots. And they all lead out to this courtyard, which is right outside the windows that I'm pointing at right now. And I'm guessing about 7, 8 months ago, some people moved in. I'm not even sure what apartment they live in. But there seem to be two different units of apartments. One behind me I'm on the second floor. One behind me on the second floor. And then there's one to the left upstairs on the third floor, I think. And it is now 3:30 in the morning, and I'm concerned about how loud I'm being right now in my apartment. I'm talking at a normal tone of voice. I'm not screaming. There's no music playing. I'm not blasting anything. But these motherfuckers who live on the third floor and know these people behind me on the second floor, across the hall from me, basically, they seem to go at it. It is now a Friday morning. It's a very, very, very late Thursday night into a Friday morning, about 3:30 in the morning on a Friday morning. And these motherfuckers are still going. And this happens every night. I worked overnights. So, for many years. And I've lived in this apartment I've lived in this apartment 11 years. And maybe this has been happening regularly while I've been at work. But now I'm here, and I'm awake sometimes at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And these motherfuckers go at it. It's 3:30 in the morning on a Friday, and I can hear people walking up and down the stairs, blasting music, drinking, every night. So I hope I'm not disturbing these people. My windows are open. Maybe they can hear me. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, so they're going right now. It's party time. So I'm not worried about the noise that I'm making right now, because right behind me, second floor, third floor up, it's party time. Party time. So if you're interested, come on over to Old Irving Park have a party with the Jagoffs who live behind me on the 3rd floor and like to walk up and down the stairs and blast music. I hear a lot of doof, 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 doof. I hear that a lot. And I'm hearing it now. It's a little quieter now. I should pick up the phone and bring it over by the back window so you can hear it, but I'm not going to do that. So anyway, if I'm a little distracted by this video that I'm doing, it's because Partyland Central here on the 3rd floor and the 2nd floor behind my apartment building, they're going nuts at 4 o'clock in the morning and 3:30ish in the morning on Friday. Fucking idiots. Hey, you remember those days when you were young and you used to get drunk till 4 o'clock in the morning? I do, but I didn't do it loudly. Well, I did it at bars and I came home quietly and passed out. I'm not a dick. I'm not an asshole neighbor. These guys are dicks. So anyway, James Caan died. There's a segue for you. This is why I won awards when I did radio, because I could segue very smoothly. Hey, I'm complaining about my neighbors. My neighbors are very loud right now. They're partying at 3:30 in the morning. Hey, James Caan died. I don't know if you knew that or not. James Caan's dead. So how are you? Hey, I like your face. You got a good face. Hey, give me some money at Patreon. James Caan's dead. I don't know if you know that or not, but James Caan, he's dead. And maybe that's what they're celebrating. Maybe that's what these assholes are celebrating. Like, James Caan, man, yeah, I love Misery. Let's get loaded. So James Caan passed away, which is a big deal. Great actor, legendary. And I just wanted to mention a few movies that I loved that James Caan was in. Now, he's 82 years old. There was no, they've not given a reason for his death or how he died. But he was a terrific actor, obviously, had ups and downs in his career, did some great movies, did some shitty movies, did some TV. Towards the end of his life, I don't know if he had 5-6 wives that he had to pay for, but he did a lot of crap toward the end of his life. Had a nice run on television in that show Las Vegas, with Tom Selleck showed up on that dumbass show. But he did multiple, so he got some syndication money towards the end there. So he did that. He had a nice run on that. Did a bunch of straight-to-video and a bunch of shitty movies. But for a time, especially in the 70s, James Caan was badass. Now, obviously, the first thing that everybody goes to is Sonny Corleone from The Godfather, and very briefly in The Godfather Part 2. Yes, he's in Godfather Part 2, even though he notoriously gets killed in Godfather in one of the greatest death and shooting and murder sequences in the history of movies. But he is in Godfather Part 2 at the end in a flashback scene. And there is a stretch of time between The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 in the early 70s to the mid-70s where James Caan was just amazing. Like, he was doing really interesting, crazy 70s movies at a time when the 70s, because the best decade ever in the history of film is the 70s. It is. I don't care what anybody says. If you think otherwise, oh no, the 50s, the 30s, fuck off. The 70s is the greatest decade in the history, consistently, in the history of film. And I was a young kid leading into my teenage years, so it was a formative time when I discovered cinema, and I think I was born at the right time to discover cinema and film, because the best shit ever was being made in the 70s. So anyway, at that time, after The Godfather and before The Godfather Part 2, there was a stretch that he did. James Caan was known. He played a lot of gangsters. He played cops. He played bad guys. He played good guys. He even did romantic stuff. He was in like a romantic sort of musical with Bette Midler called For the Boys, if you try to forget that one. But he did a lot of varying work, but a lot of like tough guys, gangsters, hard guys, that kind of shit. But like he started out, in television. He did a lot of TV, and then he would do smaller movies. I guess the big breakthrough one was, again, with Coppola, but this is way before The Godfather. He was in The Rain People. If you've not seen The Rain People, it's terrific in that movie. And that was kind of the first one that really set him off. And then, a couple of years later, he does one of the most legendary TV movies of all time, Brian's Song, which, of course, was about Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo, with Billy D. Williams and James Caan. James Caan played Brian Piccolo. Made-for-TV movie, one of those legendary 70s made-for-TV movies that actually has gone down in history as a classic. And it's one of those movies that, even the toughest tough guys in the world admit to crying during Brian's Song. And he played Brian Piccolo, and that really, boom. And then after Brian's Song, follows that up with The Godfather. So there's a 1-2 punch right there. And then from The Godfather on, he was sort of legendary after his performance as Sonny Corleone. and would go on to do a lot of great work. But here are a few movies I wanted to mention for if you're looking to watch some James Caan. Like I said, between Godfather and Godfather Part 2, he starred in a string of movies. One is called Slither, with Peter Boyle and Sally Kellerman, in which he played a thief. It was very stylish, very 70s in that it was kind of grimy. It was very, very loose. It was politically incorrect, which so many of the movies of the 70s were, refreshingly so. I love to go back and watch movies that piss people off now. Like suddenly you can't like these movies anymore. Fuck off. They're great movies. I don't care. It was a different time. If you're easily offended, then fuck off. You know what I mean? I'm just tired of it. Tired of this shit. Those movies were made at a specific time. Learn it. Oh, we can't watch that anymore. Fuck you. No, we can't watch it. It's offensive. All right, fine. It's offensive. Fine. I'm not going to deny that a great movie is great simply because there's stuff in it that's not politically correct now. Anyway, Slither. And then he followed that up with Cinderella Liberty with Marsha Mason, which was an interesting movie where he played kind of a nice guy, played a Navy guy, falls in love with a hooker, and then becomes like the surrogate parent to her kid. And a lot of chemistry between him and Marsha Mason in that movie. And they would go on to do Chapter 2, which is a terrible movie that Neil Simon wrote years later. And he was also, in that stretch, he did The Gambler, James Toback's fantastic portrait of a guy who had many, many issues, addiction problems, gambler, mob stuff. Great movie, terrific movie with an incredible performance by James Caan. It was later remade terribly with Mark Wahlberg in it. And then he followed that up with Freebie and the Bean, which is one of my favorite James Caan movies of all time, directed by the great Richard Rush, who would go on to I guess he's best known for The Stuntman with Peter O'Toole a few years later. Freebie and the Bean, a completely politically incorrect movie. It's him and Alan Arkin. They play cops trying to bring down this mobster. And again, 70s cop movie, all political correctness out the fucking window and good, yes. And it's about these two cops who are trying to stop these mobs, this mafia guy. And it is funny in all of its un-PC 70s glory. It's hilarious. James Caan is great. Alan Arkin is great. It's ridiculous. The stuff that happens, the sheer destruction on display in this movie is magnificent, and I love it. It's a dark black comedy, deeply, it dives into the 70s deeply. It's called Freebie and the Bean, one of my favorite James Caan performances of all time. And then of course Rollerball. How can you not include Rollerball among the legendary James Caan performances? Futuristic, again, remade years later very badly. Norman Jewison made it. I remember seeing it at the McClurg Court Theater in all its 70-millimeter loud Dolby glory. And he played Jonathan, and it was about this futuristic. It took place in the future, at that time in the future, about corporations and greed. And this sport called rollerball, like a killer sport called rollerball, which was, of course, at the time was really cool because the roller derby was cool. It was like a futuristic version of roller derby, but with spikes and people killing each other in a big metal ball and hanging on the back of motorcycles and shit. Rollerball, classic James Caan. And then there, of course, was The Killer Elite, a great Sam Peckinpah movie, espionage sort of spy movie. Again, remade. Jesus Christ, I'm just now realizing that all these James Caan movies have been remade terribly. Killer Elite was the bald-ass, stupid-ass Jason Statham. Fucked that movie up, too. Killer Elite, Sam Peckinpah, another great James Caan movie. And then there, in the 80s, when he hit the 80s, he directed a movie. He only directed one movie. It's called Hide in Plain Sight. Hide in Plain Sight. He was the star, and he directed it. And it's a really terrific movie. You should try and find that movie. I don't know if there are any special editions on Blu-ray or whatever available out there on 4K, whatever. But it's a really, really terrific movie. Came out in early 1980. Only movie he ever directed. Did a great job directing it. Based on a true story. It's about a guy who gets a divorce from his wife. She gets custody of the kids, but then she ends up like marrying a gangster, and it's a badass gangster, and they've got to go to witness protection, so they take the kids away. They hide the kids from him, and it's about this desperate father who's trying to find his kids who've been taken away from him witness protection program by his wife and the gangster she married, and he goes nuts. It's a terrific movie. Hide in Plain Sight. James Caan wants his kids. He's going to bust some face to get them back. And he directed it too. Really, 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 really good movie from 1980, Hide in Plain Sight. And then there is a weird, wacky comedy that he was in called Kiss Me Goodbye. This was a remake in and of itself, a remake of Donna Floor and Her Two Husbands. It starred Sally Field, and she played the widow of James Caan, who was a Broadway dancer, choreographer, soft shoe kind of guy, wore vests and straw hats and stuff. James Caan. And she is remarrying, now that, her husband is dead, she's remarrying Dork, played by Jeff Bridges, and the ghost of James Caan's soft shoe Broadway choreographer director comes back to haunt her before she gets married to Jeff Bridges and causes chaos. It's an incredibly silly movie. It's a movie I've seen a million times because, Jeff Bridges is very funny in it. And for some reason, I really like it. But, the last person on earth who you would cast as, a Bob Fosse-inspired tap shoe wearing Broadway choreographer dancer guy with a straw hat, James Caan. And yes, it's as weird as you'd imagine. Casting James Caan as as in this part is so wrong. The last guy, gangster ass Sonny Corleone, James Caan's the last guy who you would think should be in this movie. And it's weird, and it's a very strange performance in a weird movie. But I love it. It's called Kiss Me Goodbye. And then as it moved on, he did Gardens of Stone, another movie with Coppola, a great movie about Vietnam veterans and the sons and fathers who have died in war. Really terrific performance by James Caan in that, in Gardens of Stone. Alien Nation was a nice comeback for him. He had done some shitty stuff and was on the ropes for a little while, but Alien Nation kind of brought him back. That became a TV series. So even though a lot of his movies get remade, now they're getting made into TV series. It's about a cop who gets teamed up with an alien, and in the future, aliens are living with Earthlings, and they work together, and they live together, and they coexist, and they become partners. And it's a veiled, the movie is sort of a veiled film about racism and about getting along, with people who are not of your race or of your creed or of your species in this case. So it's an action thriller about an alien and a human cop who have to team up together. Really terrific movie, and it was kind of a comeback for him. He followed up Alien Nation with Misery, and a lot of people love Misery. He's terrific in it. Kathy Bates won the Academy Award for it. And again, this was kind of a comeback for him. Critically acclaimed. He's terrific in it. Everybody knows Misery, and it's a really good movie. I mentioned For the Boys. He followed up Misery the next year with For the Boys, which was this epic movie about wartime entertainment with Bette Midler and James Caan. Again, completely miscast, much like the Kiss Me Goodbye. But this movie's not, it's kind of embarrassingly bad. And at the end, some of the worst old age makeup you'll ever see in your life on Bette Midler and on James Caan. Very weird movie. He was in Elf, if you want to mention that one. Very, very funny in the Will Ferrell, Jon Favreau comedy, holiday movie. He's very funny in that. It's a terrific performance. And it was nice to see him. He had done some low-budget stuff. He'd done stuff here and there. He was in a Mickey Blue Eyes, which was a mob comedy with Hugh Grant. He had done other stuff, making small appearances here and there, and then he did Elf. But one of the ones that I want to mention, though, that's one of my favorites, is his supporting performance in Bottle Rocket. Bottle Rocket was the very first movie Wes Anderson made, and it was before Wes Anderson became, the live-action diorama director that he is now. Before he became Wes Anderson, and you knew what you were going to get. Oh, look at the quirky acting and the very still diorama camera shots. And oh, here's an obscure British 60s pop song 20 times on the soundtrack. I happen to be a big fan of Wes Anderson, most of his movies. French Dispatch, by the way, I'm not a fan of. One of the worst fucking movies I've ever seen in my life. Sometimes he's become kind of a parody of himself. But right out of the gate, he comes out with this very, very strange, low-budget, shaky movie called Bottle Rocket. And Luke and Owen Wilson, before anybody knew who the hell they were in it. But James Caan, he got James Caan to be in it. James Caan plays the leader of this ragtag group of thieves, mobster guy, sort of a mobster part. And he shows up in the second half of the movie, and he's great. It's one of my favorite James Caan performances of all time. Not a big part, small part, but he's the core, he's the heart of the movie. And it's a terrific, wonderful, fatherly, very, very funny performance. And apparently, the making of the movie was wonderful. He took the Wilson brothers under his wing. Told great stories on the set about what it was like to make these classic movies like The Godfather. And he plays this sort of gangster part that he's played a million times, but he's so funny and so warm and vulgar and hilarious in it. It's one of my very favorite James Caan performances of all time. Wes Anderson's first movie, Bottle Rocket. But for me, it all starts and ends with Thief. Obviously, everybody has seen Thief, shot right here in Chicago, one of the greatest Chicago movies ever made. Michael Mann from Chicago, his first film right out of the gate, his first theatrical movie, I should say. And James Caan, amazing in it. You know, if you've not seen Tangerine Dreams, music, the way it was shot, the cinematography, the use of the city, they blow up the Green Mill in it. Still makes me cry every time I see it. It's one of my favorite places. I haven't been there in years because, you know, I stay away from bars being a recovering alcoholic, but I spent many hours and years in that place. And when I see it blow up in Thief, I still go, oh, no! But Thief is the one I go back to. I think it's his best performance, the most layered, the most interesting. It is, you know, he plays a bad guy, he plays a thief. He's done that kind of stuff before, but never with this kind of depth. Never with this kind of passion. The scenes that he has, Tuesday Weld is amazing. The stuff that he has with Willie Nelson in it is unbelievable. The last half hour of the movie, when all the shit hits the fan, is incredible. As far as I'm concerned, the best performance, the quintessential James Caan role of all time is Thief. He's done more than I've mentioned, worked consistently, beloved by almost everybody he's worked with. All the stories that people tell about working with him on all these movies, the classic ones and the ones that aren't classic, are great. Most people, you know, maintain that working with him was fantastic. He was also a breath of fresh air in the 70s. Spent a lot of time hanging out at the Playboy Club. He was one of those 70s, let's hang out in the grotto Playboy guys. And you can see great pictures of all the clothes, you know, like the shirts open down to his navel, you know, like hanging out with playmates and shit. Jimmy Caan, baby. Jimmy Caan. He represents a time in the 70s that was great for cinema, and as far as I'm concerned, just great in general for everything in the world. Culture and everything. I love the 70s. So, anyway, James Caan passed away, and I just wanted to mention a few of these movies that maybe you haven't seen before, and also, you know, obviously some of the classics. Thief remains my favorite James Caan performance, but there are a ton of other ones here that you should check out. So I hope I've turned you on to a few that maybe you've never heard of, or stuff that you want to go back and revisit. There's much more to James Caan than just Sonny Corleone. A lot more. And it's sad that he passed away. So rest in peace, James Caan. I'm going to go hang out with my neighbors and see if anybody flies off the porch into the courtyard. Yes, they're still partying. I can still hear a little bit of the oomph, oomph, oomph. So anyway, I'm going to go look out the window and just see what kind of debauchery is happening in my neighborhood here at almost 4 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. All right. R.I.P. There, James Caan. Awesome guy. Rent some of his movies and check them out.